Hi, everyone. Majo, thank you so much for joining us today. A little bit of context for those watching for the first time, or I know it's been a while. I started this personal project, which I call A Dose of Inspiration, about 3 years ago. I've been very fortunate to travel all over the world since a young age, giving me the exposure to meet all sorts of people, very inspiring and unique. And I had this idea that I really wanted to share a lot of these stories of these individuals who, in many ways, have inspired me or lit a fire inside of me. So today we're doing things a little bit different. I've mostly done writing pieces, and today we're going video. We're in 2024. It's time that we do that. And my guest today is Maria Jose Dassum Nariño, a very good friend who I met about 10 years ago when we were starting our consulting careers. And I'm really excited to talk to her today. I admire her for her determination and grit to leave a very comfortable environment and status quo and to really define a path for herself and her own. So, yeah, I'm very excited to talk to you, Majo. Thank you for joining us. This conversation is really about you. So, without further ado, let's get started.
Sounds good. Thank you, Lau, for inviting me. I am very, very excited to be here, and I'm honored that you invited me for this interview.
Amazing. So, Majo, let's take a hypothetical. You're
Okay.
going to meet your friends for dinner and you're heading up to the restaurant in New York City and you end up in the same elevator as a personality that you really admire. How do you introduce yourself and what do you ask them if you would say anything at all?
You know, when you asked me this question, of course I would want to say like a perfect elevator pitch. But the reality of it is, if I were in an elevator and I run into someone like Taylor Swift, I would probably freak out. So you never know how you're going to react. And the reason why I mentioned Taylor Swift is because I personally really admire her. She's incredibly resilient. She's been through ups and downs. And she's inspired me from an entrepreneurship perspective, from a feminist perspective, women empowerment. And, I'm not so sure how I'd react. But perhaps I would probably thank her for inspiring me and for, um, with her music that empowers me, and I can connect to my emotions. And I would also ask her for some advice for someone who's doubting themselves. I think we all doubt ourselves whenever we're like doing something different or when we're getting criticized. What would I tell her about myself? I mean, I would love to say a beautiful elevator pitch, but realistically I would probably say like, oh my god, I'm a huge fan. That's probably
They'll
the
be
most
with me.
honest answer.
Very cool. Have you been to any of her concerts?
Not yet, but I'm planning on going in October, and I'm extremely excited.
Very exciting. I can't wait to hear the experience. Um, awesome. Majo, can you tell us a little bit about you? So, like, who is Maria Jose Dassum? Tell us about your path. Tell us about Simplemente Dinero, how you got to where you are today.
Of course. So, okay, I guess it's very funny because when you ask, tell me about yourself, I think the very traditional American perspective is I tell you what I do for a living and to earn money. And it's interesting because it's completely related to what I do. And so this philosophical question of like, does money define me or does my career define me? And so just a little bit of context before I tell you exactly what I do and for the people listening. Um, I'm Ecuadorian, Colombian, and Lebanese, and I was born and raised in Ecuador. And when I was 18, I moved to the US for college, and I've been here ever since. I worked in consulting. That's where I met Lau. And in college, I studied political economy. And I took a bunch of econ courses, accounting courses, finance courses. And, I was literally learning about, how money works from a macro perspective in a country or in a corporation. And, even though I was privileged enough to have a college education, and, I majored in economics, I realized that when I started working my consulting job, which is when I met you, I was very anxious about managing my own money. And even though I knew a lot about it, and I'll tell you more about it later if you want, but I struggled managing my own money. And so I realized that, if someone with my level of education and, had a prestigious consulting job in New York City, struggled managing her money, I would imagine that like 99% of the population in the world probably did too. And so I started learning a lot about money and, personal finance books, podcasts, online courses. And, I was like, oh my God, I need to learn how to manage my money. And eventually I started teaching personal finance in Spanish, to kind of like pay back or pay forward to my fellow Latinos. and also because there weren't that many resources in Spanish. And along the journey, of learning how to manage my money, I realized that, it's not very money management. A lot of people think it's like all about formulas and buying the best stocks and timing the market and like even like becoming an expert in finance. But what I have realized is that it's a very emotional experience too. Highly, highly emotional. And your relationship with money has a huge impact. And a huge part of that is because of what I started saying, when you asked me this question. And it's people usually value themselves by the amount of money they have or the type of career they have. And in reality, if you think about your life as a human being, you are so much more than just your career or your finances. There's like this esquema, how do you say this framework? Sorry, I'm so used to speaking Spanish right now, but there's this framework that talks about, the wheel of life. And so when you think about your life, you have, of course, your career or your education, your finances, but you're also, you have your family, you have your friends, you have your spirituality, you have, your leisure, all these different areas in your life. And so um, I think people tend to focus a lot on money, and that provokes a lot of anxiety. And it ends up consuming other areas in their lives. And so, to answer your question about what do I do and who am I, I'm a holistic human being, but from like I guess, a career perspective, I'm a financial coach and educator that helps young professional women, especially young Hispanic professional women, learn how to manage their money more confidently and improve their relationship with money, so that they can manage it well and feel comfortable, but at the same time work on the whole, how they can improve from a personal development perspective, while managing these societal expectations, their own anxieties with money, and um, very very much focused on personal development side of money. So very long answer, but I hope that that answered your questions.
You went to undergraduate degree and studied economics, and then you did consulting, and then you decided to take on this, start your own business. Can you maybe walk us a little bit more in detail? What led you to make those decisions? What actually pushed you to do that? You mentioned it a little bit earlier, but dig in a little bit more.
Of course. Um, so when you think about, the choices you make in life about, from a career perspective or what you're going to study, I think that, as you and I were speaking before this recording and this interview, you have kind of like a set path. And when you're a child, the example that you have is, what you're taught in school and your parents, and you're trying to like, figure yourself out. And I think that, getting to know yourself is a constant journey. It's not that, okay, like, oh, I'm 31 or 32 and I already know who I am exactly. And, I think everyone's always trying to figure themselves out. I think it's a myth that people like know exactly what they want and they're like settled and they're perfect. Um, yeah, I've had conversations with people, 20 years older than me, 30 years older than me, that they're still figuring it out. But in terms of my particular decisions, why did I study economics? Well, at first, believe it or not, I thought that I wanted to work in international relations. It's funny because like right now I am nowhere near that. And I pictured myself somewhere like in the, I don't know, United Nations or World Bank. And so that's sort of how I ended up studying political economy. And then I realized that I really liked, the economic side of it. In particular, there was one definition about economics that I loved, which was, how do people make decisions about their limited resources? That was like one definition that I saw. There's like a bunch of definitions about economics. And the reason I studied politics as well is because you can't have one without the other. Like politics impacts economics and vice versa. And well, anyhow, how did I end up in consulting? Well, basically, it had to do a lot with like, the visa situation as an international student, and the opportunities that were open. And I realized that when I graduated, the opportunities that I wanted in the nonprofit international organization sector were not the types of jobs that I wanted were not available to a recent undergrad without years of experience. And what I wanted after college was I wanted to continue learning. And so even though my dream, quote unquote, had been like, oh, I want to work at the World Bank or the UN, I found that the types of jobs that were available to me were, I wasn't going to learn that much. And so I opted to go for the private sector. And again, because of like, visa restrictions, like OPT and H-1B, for anyone who's like listening to this, you're probably going to understand. Basically, the options were more limited. And, I ended up going into consulting, which I ended up liking it a lot. I think that my experience working consulting was very enriching. I am incredibly thankful, not only for the people that I met, like you, that many of whom I still keep in touch with, but also it was incredible from a learning experience. And so I was there for like 6 years, and I started working like the more corporate world. I was working in financial services as a management consulting, specifically in the IT strategy and operations area, and I learned a lot. And in terms of how I ended up with Simplemente Dinero, which by the way translates to simply money, because what I try to do is like simplify these complex financial topics, including the emotional ones. But anyhow, how I ended up doing that, it's a funny story. In the pandemic, my sister got married, and turns out that she got married in Ecuador, and well, you know what happened. The world shut down, and I was unable to work from outside of the US. It was just a firm policy. And so I started teaching personal finance on Instagram as a hobby because I liked it. And I realized that I really, really liked it. And so, long story short, without expanding too much, I realized that I really, really liked it. And I had thought about, like, what if I leave the consulting job? What if I pursue something different? Do I want something different? Do I want to stay in this like very prestigious, high paying job, very secure, and like, start with entrepreneurship from scratch, not earning anything and, focusing on a completely different market. I was working with financial institutions in the US, mostly in New York. And here I was working with like Latinos, young professionals, and, it was completely different. And um, it's not a decision that I made like confidently and that I made like immediately. Like from one day to another, I was like, yes, I'm going to do it. It's something that I had pondered over a very long time. And it ended up being also a mental health situation in which I was at a project in my previous job in which it was very, very draining and it impacted my mental health. And so I needed kind of like a break. And I even, considered taking a sabbatical year because I was desperate. I was like, okay, I need a break. And I had my savings. I was like, okay, I'm thinking of taking a sabbatical year. And I remember I worked with a career coach back then, and she said, like, hey, you're thinking about a sabbatical year anyways, and your fear is like, not making money. Why don't you just try entrepreneurship anyways? Give yourself a year to try it out. And that's essentially how I started. And I realized I really liked it. And, I'm not going to say that it's like a fairy tale story. It's not that like everything worked out perfectly. I mean, like, it was really hard to make the decision to quit my consulting job. And then it's scary to start something on your own, especially something so different. I mean, I do a lot of social media marketing through Instagram, and I was so used to like the very traditional corporate, especially like in financial services, that people are very, very, you know, you're not taken seriously if you're like making videos on Instagram. And I was doing that in Spanish and like completely different. So I was like, oh my God, I feel like so different. I feel like a black sheep, like, and I remember thinking like, people are going to think I'm crazy if I'm quitting like a very prestigious corporate job to make videos on Instagram. So that was like kind of crazy. Obviously, the videos are not like the service. It's not about becoming an influencer. It's about, provide financial coaching and education. But that's the social media marketing strategy. But anyhow, long story short, that's a little bit about my journey with the entrepreneurship in general, and starting a small business. At times, it's hard to continue. It's not fairy tale. I think that a lot of times when you're interested in entrepreneurship, you look in social media and it's like, oh, I quit my job and now I make 6 figures or 7 figures or whatever. And it's definitely a roller coaster of emotions, and it's scary at times, but it really helps from a personal development standpoint. You're accountable for everything, and you need to put yourself out there. You need to learn how to sell, and it can be challenging, but it's also a very rewarding experience.
Thank you for sharing that. I love it. Can you maybe just briefly share what's the best part about being having your own company with Simplemente Dinero and also the hardest part?
I think the hardest part, I'll start with that, and I think that that's an easy one. Especially because I'm doing something so different from what's traditional. Like for context, right now, I'm currently in a master's degree at Columbia. I'm studying wealth management, and most of my classmates are currently wealth managers or financial advisors at traditional brokerage firms or banks and, RIAs. And it's a very, traditional institutional industry.
Mm.
And the classmates that are not doing that, they're career changers that most of them want to get into those most traditional roles. Whereas I am a financial coach, doing, providing services in Spanish, catered to women, and doing a lot of videos on Instagram and, having a podcast. And, it just seems like very, very different. And I think the hardest part is like, whenever you're starting out a business, you don't have cash flow every single month, or you have variable income, and you're doing things so differently that oftentimes you question yourself. You're like, oh my God, am I doing things right? Is this like too much of a risk? Is it going to work out? Especially when it's so different. It's not like I'm starting something that, I left my consulting job to start a consulting firm where I already had experience and it's like a very similar business model. No, this is like completely different. And so I think that the mindset part of it is the hardest one, which is like making sure that you continue on a day
Mm.
to day basis, even when you don't see results, because it's a long term goal. And ironically, that's the same thing that I teach when I'm providing financial coaching to my clients. It's, oftentimes what is in your best interest financially is something that you need to work hard continuously, even if you don't see results in the short term. And that's really hard at times because, emotions get in the way. It's what I was telling you, financial management. And this is a type of financial decision, whether you want to start a small business or entrepreneurship or anything like that. Uh, you need to stick to it so that, it can compound and grow, but it's not easy. And so you need to somehow find the way to like work on your mindset and keep on going, even when it's hard, even when you give it your 110% and things don't work out. And so that's probably the hardest thing. The other part of your question was like, what's the best part of, starting a small business? I think that, well, you and I were talking about controlling your schedule. I love that. I really, really like that flexibility of controlling your schedule. Note that does not mean that I work less than in my consulting job. I think at times I might work more, but that flexibility to me is priceless. And then the other part of it, similar to my first response, which was like what's hardest, which is the mindset. I do think that entrepreneurship helps a lot with from a personal development standpoint. You need to put yourself like outside of your comfort zone constantly. You need to learn things that are completely new. You feel dumb whenever there's something new. It's natural, and you're like, oh my God, why is it so frustrating? I can't get this to work, especially with an online business like mine. It's like there's so many new things and, things can be very frustrating. But at the same time, you realize that, I can do difficult things. And it really helps from a personal development standpoint. So, definitely it has its pros and its cons, but again, it can be very, very rewarding.
Yeah, I really like that, and I could go on so many tangents here. But I think a good transition might be you mentioned about, you know, in doing your own business, one of the hardest things is the mindset and continuing and pushing through. I like, I'm starting that entrepreneur career, so I can totally relate. But I'm curious to hear about like what makes you, Maria Jose, like get up in the morning, what makes you continue? Like how do you manage maybe like the difficult times and get through those and continue investing your time, even though you might get rejection or maybe you didn't, you gave it 110% and it just didn't work out. How do you continue?
So I see this as a twofold question. The first one, what motivates me, what like keeps me getting up, I don't have meetings at 7 a.m. or 7:30 a.m. like I used to, that I had to be there with like 30 other stakeholders, leading a meeting. I don't have that anymore. Um, but I still wake up and I still like work significantly. And what keeps me motivated is that I do think that what I'm doing right now is extremely fulfilling. It's something that, when I like today, this morning, I had a coaching call with some of my clients, a group coaching call, and it's incredibly fulfilling. It's like you have a purpose, it's from an emotional perspective. It's
Mm,
like, wow, I am inspiring people, I'm helping people, I'm serving people. And it's something that you know, you feel like you're giving or having a positive impact in the world. Even if it's like something small, it's something that to me that's like wow, helping young professional women feel more confident when it comes to their money and help them feel like they're not alone, especially, Latinas. And so I think that being able to help someone else and, with struggles that I had on my own and, that is something that helps me a lot in terms of, staying motivated and I'm also like I want this to work out. It's I really really want it. And so like again, it's my own project and it's like that also provides a huge source of motivation. And so even when it's hard. Now, in terms of how do I manage the situations in which, things don't really work out and, quote unquote, you fail. And it's never easy. It's never easy. No one likes to, get rejections or give your 110% and have things not work out. I think something that helps a lot is finding your sources of support and making sure you're taking care of yourself in other areas of your life. Because again, entrepreneurship is just one area from like your wheel of life. And so think about, what's your relationship like with your family or with your friends? Are you exercising? Are you sleeping well? Are you eating correctly? Nutritious food. How can you take care of yourself when things are not working out? How can you maybe take a pause? Because sometimes it's very emotional and, you know, things are not working out the way that you would want to. And it's like, okay. And there may be not just days, but like maybe weeks in which you're not feeling so great about yourself. But I think making sure that you have those sources of support in other areas of your life helps you continue. And it's okay if you have those off days. I mean, I think that, in social media and just in general, we're expected to like every single day be 100% productive and give your, you know, work, I don't know, 8 hours a day, or if you're in consulting, probably like 12 or 13 hours a day, or even more if you're in other industries. And, you know, it's, it's a very productivity based culture, the one that we have here in the US. And it's okay if you take a step back because sometimes taking a step back is what lets you take two steps forward, or three steps forward. And so essentially getting to know yourself, what, how are you taking care of yourself in other areas of your life? What are your sources of support? And being okay with not feeling okay and knowing that, tomorrow's a new day and, you can um, keep on going and you'll feel better probably.
Love it. Thank you for sharing that. So, knowing what you know now, is there any advice you would tell your 18-year-old self?
Yeah, don't doubt yourself so much. I think that this tends to happen a lot, especially with women. I think that we are so conditioned to be perfect all the time. And so, I don't know if you watched the Barbie movie, but
Yeah,
but it's like it's true. I mean, we're so conditioned to, have the perfect bodies and we're compared often and it's like never enough. And so I think that we're conditioned to doubt ourselves. And I'm not saying that men don't feel that this way, but I do think that women tend to do so more. And because one thing is not perfect, we think that everything's off. I think I saw a statistic that, women don't apply to jobs unless they tick all the boxes, like the requirements. And men do when they qualify for like 60 or 66% of it. And it's like, we tend to be very self-critical. And that's something that, you know, it's a work in progress. I think we're raised to be that way. Our culture is teaches us to be that way. And even though that's something that I would tell my 18-year-old self, it's still something I have to remind myself nowadays. And so I think that that would be the advice for my 18-year-old self.
I like it. Just a few more questions. What are you most excited about?
Regarding what?
But maybe what are you looking forward to the most at this moment in time?
Um, right now, it's funny that like the first thing that came into my mind, is mixed feelings. I'm excited to graduate soon from my master's degree because that's gonna mean more time to myself. So that's like the quick question. Sorry, the quick response to your answer. It's like having more time to myself because I do think that again, this is something that ambitious young professional women tend to do. That like we want to like do everything all at once. And so you might be starting a business and also doing a master's degree like me, or you might have a side hustle and have a corporate job that's very demanding, or, just so many things that we're like really hard on ourselves. And sometimes we don't have time for ourselves. And so, but that being said, I do love my master's degree. I feel like it's been like a great learning experience and I really like the people that I've worked with, or studied with, I guess. I'm excited about that. I'm also excited to keep on working on my business. I have new projects coming up, so I'm excited.
I like that. And I think to your earlier point, it's trade-offs, right? I think with anything, it's trade-offs. I really believe in that. And like to end with this question that I think I heard it in a podcast and I really like it. I like to hear people's responses. What is your definition of success? How do you define success?
Happiness. When you're happy.
Personal happiness?
Personal happiness. Yeah.
And what does that mean to you?
To me, it means fulfillment in the different areas in my life. And again, it's ironic because what I'm telling you is like emotionally, psychologically, it's like very hard to like achieve that 100% and feel great about all the different areas in your life. But having that sort of like balance, making sure that, you have stability, financial stability, that you're doing well in your career, that you're helping others, that you have a good relationship with your family, with your friends, with your partner. You know, I think that happiness would be the definition of success. And it's not always achievable. You're not always going to have, full equilibrium in all areas of your life, or, sometimes one area may not be as great as other areas, but trying to have that balance. And also, I think having strong relationships with other people, that has been proven psychologically, that makes people feel fulfilled and happy. So that would
Yeah,
be my definition of success.
thank you for sharing that. And I agree. I think, I mean, we would joke around the efficient, what was that curve? The uh
Um,
maximizing
the profit probabilities frontier, production probabilities frontier. I think oh my god, I
yeah,
forgot.
that
Yes.
curve essentially. And I think maybe you can't always have equilibrium, like you said, but sometimes things compensate for one another. So thank you for sharing that. And Majo, where can people find out more about your business, Simplemente Dinero, if they want to take your coaching? What's the best way to reach you?
Perfect. So, if you're an English speaker, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm sure now that if you publish this, you're gonna include or tag me. Uh,
I'll think about it.
I don't I don't remember my username. This is kind of embarrassing, but you can find me as Maria Jose Dassum on LinkedIn. And then if you do speak Spanish, I do a lot of my services in Spanish. And I'm actually on Instagram almost every single day. You can find me as Simplemente Dinero. You can see over here. That's how you spell it. Simplemente Dinero. So at simplemente.dinero. And so you can directly reach out that way. But it's been very, very nice talking to you, Lau.
Thank you so much, Majo. And just a quick, I'm going to do a little bit of marketing for you because I actually was one of the beta users of Majo's coaching program. And I think what I found the most valuable is connecting your financial decisions to your values. And that's something that I still do today. And budgeting. It sounds so simple, but you just, you know, based on your specific situation and think about, how much realistically you can spend in one area versus another based on your values, what you like to spend your time doing, or whether that's like health wise or with family or anything. It has helped me a lot. So I highly recommend it, especially for those Latino women who are trying to figure it out. So, little spiel. Majo, thank you so much. This has been great, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your life story, just how you pivoted from the consulting career to doing your own business. I really admire you so much. So thank you for inspiring me and for being here at a dose of inspiration.
Thank you, Lau. And thank you so much for your kind words. It's funny because you're saying all these things, nice things about me, and I feel exactly the same way about you. Lau tends to interview other people, but I have interviewed Lau in Spanish, and she's also extremely, extremely inspiring. And so if you speak Spanish and you want to hear her interview, it's on my podcast called Libertad Financiera. It's called El Cambio or something like that. But feel free to reach out and I'll find Lau's interview. But thank you, Lau. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very honored. And I hope that this served as a dose of inspiration to anyone who's hearing this interview.
You, Majo.